Hello class, today we're looking at the test 3-1 review. So this test is over slope and y-intercept and all the different ways that you can find that. So we know that we have four basic ways that we're looking at to find slope. We know that from a graph we can use rise over run. So rise over run on that graph. Okay? We know that from a t-chart we can do the delta y, or the change in y, divided by the change in x. So when we're looking at that t-chart, we look for the pattern on this side divided by the pattern on this side. So the pattern on the right divided by the pattern on the left. We know that if I give you 2 points, that we can use this formula to find our slope. So I've told you to label one point as point 1, label the second point as point 2. So within point 1, that is x1 and y1, and point 2, that is x2 and y2. And you take the values that correspond to those labels and you plug it in and you can find slope from that. We also know that slope in a situation is called a rate of change. So with that in mind, let's go over this test review. So your test will look very similar to this. So all you have to be able to do is do these concepts and you should do fine on the test. So the first question just asks, you're given y is equal to 5x plus 3. What is the slope? What is the y-intercept? Now we know slope is always in the form of a fraction. So when we write it in the equation, we write it in simplest form. But when I'm writing it as slope, I would like for you to write it as a fraction. So in this case, the slope is going to be represented by the value that is with our x. And we know that is our m value. So in this particular case, the slope is 5 over 1. We know that the other value, the constant, is our y-intercept. It is the value in which the graph will cross the y-axis. So our y-intercept is 3. Now in number 2, okay, we're given a t-chart. So to find slope in a t-chart, we know that's delta y divided by delta x. So the pattern on the right side is increasing by 5. The pattern on the left side is increasing by 1. So again, our slope is 5 over 1. Now our y-intercept, okay, it is going to be the y value when x is 0. So I find when x is 0, I look at the y value, and that is 12. Now number 3 is a little bit tougher, because this one says, what is the slope and y-intercept of the line that goes through -4, 6 and -2, 0? Well, we're given 2 points, so that means that we need to use the slope formula to find what slope is. So what I've told you to do is take the first point, label it number 1. Take the second point, label it number 2. So in this point 1, this becomes x1 and y1. This one becomes x2 and y2, and we plug our values in accordingly. So our formula says y2, which in this case is 0, minus y1, which is 6, divided by x2, which is -2, minus x1, which is -4. And we simplify. So 0 minus 6, we know that will give us a -6. -2 minus -4, when we know a minus and negative, we change to plus a positive. And that gives us -2 plus 4, which gives us 2, which will then simplify to -3 over 1. So our slope then is -3 over 1. Okay. Now the y-intercept is a little bit tougher to find. Now what we have to do, and what I've taught you, is we take our formula for a line. Y is equal to mx plus b. Well, right now, I know the m value. So I can plug in my -3 into that m value. What I'm looking for is the b. Okay? That's what I want to find. But now, I need to understand values of x and y, or I need to know those. So what I've taught you is you take one of these points. It doesn't matter which one. Let's say I'm going to take this point right here. Well, this point is made up of an x value and a y value. So I can take that x and y and plug it in to the formula. So the x is -2, so I'm going to plug that in right here. The y is 0, so I'm going to plug that in right here. And now we calculate the value for b. I'm looking for that value. So we got 0 is equal to, well, -3 times -2 gives me 6, plus what will give me 0? Well, we know that's going to be a -6. So our equation then would be y equals -3x plus -6. So our y-intercept is -6. And that's how we calculate slope and y-intercept when given just 2 points. Let's continue. So number 4 says, when the data from the table are graphed on a coordinate grid, the points all lie on the same line. That's very important. Based on that, then, what are the slope and y-intercept of this line? So in this one, slope from a t-chart, as it shows right here, delta y divided by delta x. So we look for our pattern on the right, which is decreasing by 3, and our pattern on the left, which is increasing by 1. So negative 3 divided by 1 gives us a slope of negative 3 over 1. Now the y-intercept is the y value when x is 0, so that would be 2. Now number 5 asks you to do the same thing, but also put the slope and y-intercept in our formula for a line. So for slope, we do the same thing. What is my pattern on the right? Increasing by 4. What is my pattern on the left? Decreasing by 2. So that means our slope is 4 divided by negative 2, which is just going to be 4 divided by negative 2 gives us negative 2 over 1. Right? And the negative doesn't matter where that negative is as long as one of those numbers is negative. Now our y-intercept, again, is the y value when x is 0. So that's our 6. So when I plug that into my formula, that becomes negative 2x plus 6. Now in number 6 and number 7, we start talking about a rate of change. Rate of change is just another word for slope. Okay, it's all it is. It's all we're talking about is slope, because rate of change is another way of looking at slope. Now this t-chart is horizontal, so could I change that to vertical if I wanted to? Yes, I could. I could rewrite this t-chart so that this is my x side, this is my y side, because time is our independent. It doesn't change. So we could write, with this x right here, 0, 1, 2, and 3, and then do the same thing, 0, 4, 8, 12. We could write the rest of them as well. So this is our y side. So now I'm looking for what is my rate of change, or what is my slope. So that is my pattern on the right, which is increasing by 4, divided by the pattern on the left, 4 divided by 1, so my slope is 4 over 1. My y-intercept is my y value when x is 0. So my y-intercept is 0. So if we were to plug this back into the equation, we end up with 4x, put our slope into the x, plus 0. So y is equal to 4x plus 0. Now number 7, I give you the graph. Okay, and I want you to find the slope and y-intercept. Now to find slope from a graph, as we said here, we do rise over run. Okay, so we find 2 good points. So here's a good point, here's a good point, well here's another good point. So I can use any of those. So I'm going to go from my left point to my right point, so that is up 2 over 1. So that means my slope is 2 over 1. My y-intercept is the y value when x is 0. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4. So my y-intercept is 4. So in my equation, y equals 2x plus 4. And now we look at situations. Okay, and this one says the graph shows the relationship between the amount of sales Mr. Jameson makes each week and the amount of money he earns at a department store. So what is the y-intercept? Well, again, just because this is a situation, it doesn't mean it's any different. The y-intercept is where does the graph cross the y-axis? And in this case, it crosses at 1,000. And it would be in terms of dollars. Okay, now we need to find the slope. Well, from a graph, we look for 2 good points. So here's a good point, here's a good point, here's a good point. Now we have to pay attention to our labels on the side. So this right here says it goes up 1 line and runs 2 lines. But in this one 1 line actually represents 250. Okay, and then 1 line going across represents 5,000. So that means the slope of our line then is 250 over 5,000. And then we have to simplify that. But we know my zeros can cancel out there. And now we've got 25 into 500. Okay, so that will go, 25 goes into 25 1 time, and 25 goes into 500 20 times. So our slope is actually 1 over 20. So now to put that into the equation, our slope is 1/20th, and our y-intercept is 1,000. Okay. Now, what about number 9? Number 9, we're doing the same kind of thing. We've got a situation. Okay, so according to the graph, what is the rate of change? Well, again, rate of change is just what's the slope. So we're finding 2 good points. So here's a good point, here's a good point, here's a good point. So that means we're going down 1 and we're running 2 lines. So that's down $1,000 over 2 years. Okay, so 1 to 2 is basically what we're looking at. So our slope is 1 over 2. Okay, what is our y-intercept? Well, our y-intercept is this 8, but what does that 8 really represent? We could say 8 or $8,000 in reference to what we're talking about right here. Okay, so with this equation then, we've got equation is y is equal to, and this 1/2 is the same kind of thing. It's down 1 thing, which is really 1,000 over 2 years. Okay, so we've got a slope of 1/2, and then since I'm using just the 1/2, we're going to use just the 8, okay, instead of the 8,000. Now, if I use the 8,000, then I need this one to actually be 1,000 over 2, which would then simplify to 500 over 1. And I'll accept both answers on the test if we have one like this. Okay, we have one last question to do, and that's number 10. Okay, so from this equation, what is our slope and y-intercept? We need to remember the slope is always the value that is with our x. So our slope in this case is 3/4. Our y-intercept is 2. Now to graph that, it's real simple. We start with the y-intercept. So we come up here to 2 and we put a dot. Now that slope says, from a graph, rise over run. So from this y-intercept, I'm going to rise 2, and I'm going to run 4 and put a dot. Rise 3 and run 4. So I'm going to do the same thing with the next one. Rise 3 and run 4 and put a dot. Now if I want to go the other direction, I just fall 3 and I run the other direction. Now once I have some points, and you're going to have to graph at least 3 points on the test, I then draw my line connecting the points and I'm done. So this test is about finding slope. And we know that we can find slope 4 different ways. From a graph with rise over run, from a t-chart with delta y divided by delta x, from a formula when given 2 points where slope is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. And then in the real world, we have situations. And what we're looking for to find slope is a rate of change. So if you can answer all of these types of questions, then you should do well on the test when we have it. Until next time.